Welcome to the LTH product briefing. Today we are here with Wemble CEO, Hugo Falk. Hugo, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Hugo, you're one of the most interesting and engaging CEOs in this space that I know because of your age and when you got started and the experience you already have. Can you tell everyone a little bit about how you got started as an entrepreneur and the beginnings of Wemble?
Sure. So when I was quite young, me and my brother were always competing about finding new ways of selling things to people and just building products. But I just realized that I was too young. I didn't have education. I didn't have any capital. I was very limited in what I could do. So I started to think, how could I start sooner? And then I discovered that programming could be a very good shortcut for me to just get started much sooner than I would have otherwise. So when I was 5, I started studying programming on my own. And after a few years, I started to build some apps and websites. When I was 12, I launched my first company, which was an edtech platform, where I built just an easier way to study. It was just trying to solve a problem for me and my friends at school, but then soon everyone at my school was using it. And then now we have about 300,000 users here in Sweden. A few years after that, I met a lawyer working at one of the major firms here in the Nordics. And I was very interested in how he was working, because that was one of the careers I was thinking about in the future, being a lawyer. So I asked a bunch of questions all the time. So how is it being a lawyer? How does this work? How does that work? And I discovered that, of course, it was a very glamorous life in many ways, but there were also a lot of problems, especially when it comes to work-life balance. So he was working past midnight almost every day, was always super stressed out. And at the same time, he had people in his group who barely had anything to do. And they didn't dare to go up to their partner and say, I'm not doing anything. Instead, they pretended like they were working when they weren't. So what we did together was we built this very simple app where all the lawyers could report their workload in real time. So they could say that I'm too busy right now or I'm available. We built this and launched it at his group. And just after a few weeks, things started to change a lot for them. Partners were able to accept more work because they could always find someone in Wemble who was available. It didn't take long for the other groups at that firm reached out and asked if they could try it as well. And then quite soon, Wemble was used by thousands of lawyers in the Nordic region, and we started selling it to other firms. And that was basically how we started. At that time, I was 15. So we didn't feel that it was responsible to grow much further. While in high school, we ran this quite passively. We took in some people just for the IT aspects of it to make sure that was secure. But then we waited until I graduated high school last year. And since I've been the CEO and running this full time.
That's very impressive, Hugo. I am well into my 40s and I just started to learn to code. So the fact that you learned it at 5 is incredible. And so when did Wemble officially launch into the market?
That's a good question. I think it would be the fall of 2019 is when we landed our first customer outside of that trial firm and where the company was officially launched.
Interesting. And as we've spoken about, obviously during the pandemic, there's probably more of a need for this kind of thing with hybrid working and all of that sort of thing. I imagine you saw that need in the market as well.
Exactly. So it was not long after we launched this officially that the pandemic started, but we were really able to use that to our advantage. So a lot of the problems with the capacity management got even bigger during the pandemic. Before, partners could see a bit like if they were working around the office, if someone looked very busy or looked like they weren't doing anything. If everyone's at home, that's much harder to see. And also this sense of belonging to a group really disappeared when everyone was working at home. So the need for a tool like Wemble to be able to see what everyone was doing grew. So we were able to ride on that wave and really grow a lot during that pandemic.
That's interesting. Hugo, I'm very curious to see the platform. Can we jump into Wemble and take a look?
So this is how Wemble looks like when you log in. So as mentioned before, the important thing is that the partners are able to see the workload of all of the associates. But for that to work, we need associates to actually use the platform. There are so many nice legal tech solutions out there which work great in theory, but then no one is actually using. So we started to think about how could we build this in a way where people will actually use it. So what we did was we started to think about what are people doing when they have 5 or 10 minutes over in the day. Might go onto Facebook and look what their friends are doing. So we built Wemble like a social network where you can not only report your own data, but also view all of your colleagues. By doing this, we didn't need all the push notifications or different ways of pushing people to use Wemble. We just built it in a way where people actually use it by themselves.
Essentially, you made this so that people could access it where they were already working.
Exactly. So we tried to just leverage their existing workflows and make this as small of a change as possible in how they were already working. So the way it works then is that you log into Wemble. Here in the first box, you have your current workload. So you have 4 different levels here. You have available, some availability, busy, and seriously busy. We've done a lot of research and trial and error to figure out the optimal way of reporting workload, and also interviewed a lot of firms who've tried to to build like this themselves. And what we've discovered is that many use this 1, 2, 3 or low, medium, high scale. But the problem with that is that everyone always chooses the medium option. That's why we have 4 levels. And as you can see, there's no real middle one. So instead of saying low, medium, high, we're really saying if you're available or not. And also we've added colors just to make everything look a bit nicer. And in addition to this, you're also able to set a forecast. So you might be super busy right now, but you'll be available from next week. Then you can indicate that here.
Do you find that people use that forecasting feature as well? That seems to be like a higher lift in terms of adoption.
Yeah, so that's used quite a lot. Oftentimes also people might add their vacation in Wemble, and the partners are still able to see that when people are getting back, what is their forecasted workload, just to be able to forecast everything a bit better.
And I saw
But
down below somebody is on secondment. That's clever that you're able to add things like that as well.
yeah, exactly. So you can add whatever kind you want, and then they're down on the bottom. This is the core functionality and the 90% of the value of Wemble, just being able to report your workload, and for partners being able to delegate based on all of this data. But then we really try to create even more data which the partners can use to delegate. So that's where you're able to search for a competence here so that you can see all the lawyers who know GDPR and then find the one who's available for that specific task.
And Hugo, how do you get those competencies into the system? So 2-part question. The second, how do you assign competencies to specific lawyers, or do they do that themselves?
So many firms use systems already for keeping track of competences. Then we just try to use them because we want Wemble to be as little work in additional work as possible for the firms. So then we just leverage our APIs to bring in external data. But some firms don't use that right now. So then we've also built our own competence database in Wemble. So here you can create new competences and just add people and then rank their skill. And then firms are able to define their own scale. So if they have some scale before, then they can use that in Wemble as well. And in addition to being able to just keeping track of how well someone knows a specific skill or competence, you're also able to indicate if you would like to learn something. So as an associate, if you want to go into IPOs in the future, then you can mark those related skills as would like to learn. And then when a partner is staffing a new project, they could see if there are any associates who would like to go in that direction later on in their career and choose those people.
That's very clever. And so for competencies, you could list, I saw you had languages, you also have specific privacy. So it could be areas of law, languages. I imagine it could also be specific task-based competencies.
Exactly. And then all of that is available here from the main page. And you can also combine them. So let's say when someone knows GDPR and speaks German, then you can find those people.
Oh, that's very clever. Yeah.
One of them is available, one is seriously busy. Then maybe this one is the wisest option.
That's great. And so you find that people are interested in coming into the system in order to see what their colleagues are doing as well?
Exactly. The way this works is that everyone is able to view their colleagues because this isn't any sensitive data. It isn't time reporting or anything like that. This is just a traffic light system of the current workload. So by being able to see your colleagues, people want to go into Wemble. And then that also increases the data quality. Because if it wasn't for this, then people could say that I'm busy when they're really not. But when you know that all of your colleagues can see this, then you have to be a bit more honest, which just increases the data quality in terms of accurate reporting, but also in terms of how often people report.
And is this broken down at the team or practice group level?
So by default, you're seeing your team here, but then there are other ways of sorting. So you might want to see everyone in one office or all the M&A groups across a firm, for example. Then we've built a very flexible sorting system.
And I imagine that's configurable by firms, so they could probably define what those look like.
Exactly.
And what about reporting? So if I'm not an associate, I'm a partner and I want to see what my team is doing, for example, or what their forecasted capacity might be over the next few months or what it has been over the last month. Are there ways to do that as well?
So we have this statistics page. So as a partner, you're able to see over time how the capacity of your group has fluctuated. You have all these kinds of metrics which are extracted from all the data, and you're also able to see all of your people over a longer period of time. So someone might be super busy right now, and that might not be a problem. But if someone has been busy for many months, then that might be something worth looking close into.
I really like the way you've done this, that you can see it at the individual level as well as at the group level, because there are so many reasons why that's useful. I mean, as a partner, partner, it helps you with forward planning, it helps the firm from a kind of headcount staffing perspective. I imagine it also plays into performance reviews and that kind of thing. But then also from a wellness perspective, just understanding if someone has been consistently overwhelmed with work for many months. I imagine some firms might use that to ensure that people are doing okay.
Exactly. And then also, in addition to just the workload, when you're able to combine workload with other kinds of data, then you can really get a lot of value out of this. So here you have all the competences, which we spoke about before, and then you're able to see which competences have the highest average workload. So we had a very interesting case where we had a firm in the US, in the south of US, working a lot with Mexican clients. And they had, the normal distribution might have an M&A group, a due diligence group, and so on. And they had quite good understanding of which groups were the most busy. But when they started using Wemble, they discovered that the skill Spanish was very high in workload. So everyone who knew Spanish was much busier than everyone else, but they didn't know that because they didn't have one Spanish group. They had Spanish-speaking people across many groups. By using Wemble, you're able to find certain patterns which might not be recognizable without a software like Wemble.
Interesting, which again goes into recruiting, and potentially if these were legal skills might also lead to an understanding that maybe more training or more education around certain skills is necessary. Smart. Well, this is fantastic. Hugo, thank you so much for showing it to us. If people want to get in touch and see more of Wemble, I will put an URL down below on the screen so that people can get in touch with Hugo and his team. And Hugo, are you operating globally at the moment, predominantly in Europe? What firms are you seeking to hear from?
So currently, most of our clients are in Europe, and we're looking to expand. So now it's mostly the Nordics, but our focus now is the rest of Europe. And then we've also gotten started in the US.
Wonderful. Hugo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.